Hey everybody, it's Ryan Saplin, your personal trainer here on YouTube, going over a real-time shoulder mobility routine. And I made it so it was uncut, at least in the center I didn't cut. I cut the edges off, of course, but I made it so that it was real-time, essentially what a shoulder mobility or a generic shoulder mobility routine looked like. And what I mean by generic, I mean not trying to work on a specific bottleneck or movement fault. I'm just working on overall internal and external rotation of the shoulder so that I have good movement patterns. When you do shoulder mobility or when you stretch, the real purpose of stretching is essentially trying to make sure that you're freeing up the ranges of motions you're having trouble with, or you're preparing yourself to move, prep yourself into move in the position that you're going to move in, like if you're going to go into a deep squat, if you're going to go into extension like a bench press, bringing the bar to your chest, going maybe behind the neck presses, stretching in that way if you're going to do overhead pressing, or behind the neck overhead pressing if you're going to be doing like front rack like I'm doing here, and if it's front rack stretch for basically front squats, if you hold a front rack position squat, when you rack the bar on your shoulders, on your collarbone, or on your front delts. And my kind of viewpoint when it comes to shoulder mobility is that you just do as much as you need necessary. When you're doing it before the workout, again, always my main perspective on this entire routine is just getting the shoulder to move around all the ranges of motion, so that when you're carrying a heavy barbell or dumbbell or pushing over your head, your arm has the freedom to go into positions that it can. This is kind of some of the reasons why some people hurt themselves, because your body doesn't, even though you might be really strong, you might be able to deadlift 500 plus pounds, bench press over 300-400 pounds, squat 500 pounds. If you are put in a position where you don't have control, or you haven't been in for long periods of time, you're going to be weak there, and you're going to put yourself in a very significant disadvantage. And typically at the sacrifice of the joint, typically you're going to have to sacrifice spinal mechanics, so your spine's going to move too much, or shoulder mechanics. Your shoulder's not going to be in a very good position that makes for the shoulder to function appropriately. It'll function, it'll do what it needs to, but if you put heavy loads or you put lots of speed, like throwing a baseball, or doing like a clap push-up, or pushing up off like plyo push-ups, for example, you're gonna basically give the shoulder a chance to basically run into itself. Excuse me there. And you don't want that. You don't want your shoulder to run into itself. And what I mean by that is like impingement. That's sort of a way of explaining the shoulder is running into itself. Like the scapula is pinching the supraspinatus, which is the rotator cuff muscle that initiates abduction, abduction, right? Moving away from the midline. I made this video specifically a different kind of video so you can actually see how it goes right before your workout. This is something that you can do if you're going to do an upper body day, and it takes about 10 minutes. You can see I don't really spend like 2 minutes on each section or each segment of my body, as like Kelly Starrett mentions in Mobility WOD. All I'm doing is I'm basically kind of warming up and pushing my shoulder joint, or my humerus, my upper arm, into all the movements that I may potentially go in. And all this is designed to do is to help free up the movement so that my body's prepped for certain positions. And I can tell you right now, it goes a really long way when you mobilize before working out. And when I say mobilize, that's basically sort of like call it a high-level warm-up, because what you're doing is you're just, again, getting your body ready. It's sort of like doing a practice lap, right? Or almost like a practice lap. You're practicing certain turns. You're practicing the way you're going to turn on the track, if that makes any sense. Another way to look at it is also getting your shoulder blade muscles to wake up, because a lot of us love the bench. We love to do pressing movements. We love to move some heavy ass weight. And one of the things that are really important when it comes to pushing heavy ass weight is making sure you have a tight upper back. And one of the things that make it difficult to have a tight upper back, or a strong upper back that can activate firmly enough, is a flexible chest. Because if your chest is super tight, what's going to end up happening is you're going to cause a lot of issues in your back to be able to actually activate and use the muscles properly to allow that shoulder blade to move the way it should. That's essentially what happens. Interestingly enough, this is actually one thing I did want to talk about. I had a client, she has trouble retracting her shoulder blade. And when I say retract, that means bring the shoulder blade back. This is very common with a lot of older people who don't work out, or don't work out properly, or even a lot of guys that I've seen who don't do back exercises correctly. They basically end up shrugging the weight. They have no scapular control. they have no scapular control, or they don't have good scapular control, so they can basically shrug to their heart's content, but they can't get the shoulder blade to come back and drop down. And that's kind of a big deal, because what ends up happening is you end up being the only strong position you have when you make a movement is to be able to shrug your shoulders, which basically puts the humerus in a position that tends to be very tight into the ball and socket of the scapula and the humerus, which again puts you in a position to potentially cause impingement or basically have bad mechanics. That stretch I just did there was internal rotation with a bit of a distraction. Internal rotation simply means turning in the humerus and then distracting the joint by pulling the humerus in a better position back into the socket. Here's a chest stretch. Then after I do a chest stretch, I do a banded distraction, or not really distraction, say kind of emphasis external rotation, very similar to the PVC pipe. And just holding for a few seconds, 20-30 seconds, just enough so I can just feel some muscles start to lengthen a little bit. The biggest difference approach by, again, stretching before you work out, or in my case, when I'm doing stretching before I work out, all I'm doing is I'm just getting the tissues ready for working out. I'm not really spending like 2 minutes, 3 minutes trying to fix something. I'm simply moving things around in a very methodical way, basically like a dynamic warm-up. So here's a lat stretch. What I'm doing here is turning my palm up. It's very important when you do the lat stretch, you're trying to externally rotate the palm, really open up that lat, and also that long head of the tricep. And then I switch sides. I remember the first time I did this exact stretch where I distracted the shoulder joint, shoulder into the humerus into the socket of the joint. The first time I did this stretch, I can't tell you how much better my shoulder felt. It was crazy. It was like, wow, I never knew my shoulder was that sticky, was that jacked up. And then after I did this stretch, I had so much freedom. The only problem is I don't have very good motor control, or enough motor control to go through these strict positions. This is kind of like a hang position if you do hang cleans, or hang is a hang position. And that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to stretch that out. So it applies to Olympic weightlifting as well. And remember, the shoulder does all kinds of movements. So you want to make sure that's basically why people get in trouble with their shoulder, why they have problems, because their shoulder can't do everything that it's supposed to do. So it has to do a secondary position, which is often bad when the weight is heavy, or if there's lots of fatigue, or there's some really bad mechanical position where you're lifting heavy weight, like failure. But back to what I was saying about a client of mine, she couldn't depress her shoulder blade, she couldn't pull the shoulder blade back, she couldn't drive it down. One way that I do is I have people hold their arm out and straight in front of them like a zombie, and I want to see them pull their shoulder blade back without moving their elbows. And what you're going to find is that a lot of the time, for these people that don't know how to move their body correctly, or don't have any good control in their shoulder blade, you'll find is that they don't have, she doesn't have the ability to use her back muscles in her lower trapezius and rhomboids. She can use her traps and a little bit of her higher rhomboids, but she has no strength. So this is kind of what's giving her shoulder problems, or one of the main reasons is that she doesn't have control to actually put the shoulder in a better position. And what does that is having a very, very tight chest. And when you have a very tight chest, it makes it so that the scapula and the humerus are very restricted so that back muscle can activate. So if you stretch out your chest and you mobilize the shoulder, what's going to end up happening is you're going to be able to squeeze the shoulder blades back, or you're going to have more freedom to squeeze the shoulder blades back. But the problem is, under most circumstances, those muscles end up being extremely weak. And it takes a lot of time to really wake those muscles up. A lot of the time, what a lot of clients will find, or maybe what you might find, is you're going to feel a lot of cramping in your lower lats, mid to lower lats of your lat muscles of your back, because you're not used to using that muscle, because the lats actually help in a little bit of shoulder depression. For some people, the lat actually inserts in the bottom part of the back of the shoulder blade. And what I found is that if you're not used to this position, it is freaking crazy how that feels to get those lats to basically cramp up or fire. If you're used to bodybuilding and you're really good at basically beating the shit out of your lats, then you already know what this feeling is. But for a lot of people, if you're like, one of the ways that I remember feeling this position is doing overhead squats, or learning how to do overhead squats. One of the most ridiculous, most difficult movements to make. I went on a quest, the Broken Leopard quest. If you search my channel, you'll see some Broken Leopard videos. It's kind of like a tag along to Supple Leopard of Kelly Starrett's book. And what I've found is that once you mobilize your lats and you're able to give better motor control, you're able to basically get really much more flexible, and you're able to allow that shoulder blade to move up and down, forward and back in a way where you're much safer. And then for this last part here, I'm going to be doing some rolling of my shoulder. I probably should have spent more time on here, but I kind of was running out of time. I only had about 40 or 50 minutes, or 40 minutes to work out, so I just wanted to spend 10 minutes mobilizing. So I just basically got into that pec minor, kind of that section region of a little bit top part of my pec major, maybe a little bit of that front delt, and just kind of trying to press on some tissues, create some internal external rotation, and also mash on the medial shoulder blade, or medial the medial delt, or the insertion of the medial delt, so that way the tissues can basically move more freely. You can free up that fascial tissue, and I just do both sides really quick. And that was pretty much it. I hope this video was helpful for you. That way you can get a sense for, basically moving from item to item really quick. You're not really spending a ton of time, but it definitely does make a difference. It makes you feel a lot better. And if you have tight shoulders and you do this every day, I pretty much guarantee you, your shoulder's gonna feel so much better. It's kind of ridiculous, actually. And then what ends up happening, you get such a good feeling of how the results feel, and then what ends up happening is that you stop, and then it gets bad again. So you got to be very studious about being consistent. All right, I'm done. That's my uncut video of mobility, 11 minutes. I'll probably do some video commentary, which you'll see overlay this video, which I already did. And I'm just gonna keep it uncut because I want to kind of show you exactly how a mobility routine goes for me. And if you want to hear me talk, you'll watch the whole video if you can get to this point. Anyways, thanks for watching. Subscribe if you're not a subscriber, click like, share with somebody. I'm going to make other videos to kind of explain everything a little bit better, or explain everything, period. But anyways, thanks for watching.